Here, basic diversity of student populations, students numerous characteristics, and our goal was to develop an instrument to measure attitudes of teachers, of prospective teachers towards having heterogeneous groups of challenge to teach students that differ in terms of their academic context or social conditions or racial background. Professional knowledge, as we know, provides the requirement to design instruction to include differences of students and to teach them and other factors that influence the teaching style of teachers or value systems, beliefs, and attitudes. And we know that attitudes can be different cognitive and we also applied the expected value model and methods to examine the value, the cost, and the intrinsic value, the cost, utility value, and expected success of prospective teachers towards dealing with heterogeneous. Well, there's a lot of, there's not a lot of research that investigates or examines especially not towards different groups of students. We found a lot of research towards or about prejudice or the attitudes multicultural or egalitarian attitudes. There is some research towards attitudes, of attitudes towards achievement differences, and there are some studies that investigate attitudes of teachers towards differences of the social. We do not know about there. To our knowledge, there is no study that investigates the attitudes of teachers towards dealing with heterogeneous groups of students. So our research question was, can that theoretical assumed factor structure can be tested? We developed behaviors that measure cognitive effective behavior attitudes somewhere based on expected value model. And is that possible to differentiate it for all the areas of heterogeneity? We are trying to differ we had a data of 240 maps, 73 female and the instrument that we developed was we formulated scales to conduct value, the utility value. We had two scales to conduct cost, and one scale to conduct the intrinsic value, on one scale to conduct the we formulated all these five scales for differences on heterogeneity in performance or achievement, heterogeneity of students regarding the social status, and heterogeneity of students which differ because by culture. Yeah, here I have some examples to conduct the utility value. The item example is students focused by heterogeneous learning groups that would be heterogeneous learning groups need more effort for teachers. The second stage is conduct the cost of actually teaching. Heterogeneous learning groups are where the value items that were enjoyed teaching students and expected success would be I learned and the heterogeneous learning groups in several ways. Yeah, the from alpha looks good for all the scales, exceptional. The means are also not showing any yeah, it's okay as well as the standard deviation. What we did, well, we developed the instrument and the first step to investigate the factor structure. Could be the assumed factor structure is empirically tested. Is that we tested different models towards to each other. We have the one factor structure and the five factor structure, and we also tested a higher factor model. These are the results for cultural heterogeneous groups. As you can see, the one-factor model is way the model and fit results are a lot worse than the five-factor model, and we didn't get any results for the higher factor model. So our theoretically assumed structure could be the same for the complex heterogeneous students that differ a lot in regarding their achievement in school. You see the same or similar results here. The one-factor structure model is a lot worse. Scores are a lot worse. The five-factor model, the theoretically assumed five-factor model is good, and we don't have any results for the high-factor model or five-factor higher order model. The same for the heterogeneous of students with certain social characteristics. We have the one-factor model that has not so good scores, like compared to the five-factor model. We don't have any results for the higher factor order model, and the theoretically assumed factor structure could be proved here again. So, what we say is we developed an instrument to test the attitudes towards dealing with heterogeneous students. Our assumed five-factor structure could be proved for all three areas of heterogeneity. What we have to do is to further examinations towards the relationship of teacher instructional behavior, or even, if this model has been, skills are validated, testing the relationship to yeah. Then we have time for we have students that differ because of their migrational background, they have cultural differences. We have students that come from different economic backgrounds. They differ in their behavior. They have different value systems, very different beliefs. So you have to deal with a lot of different students that have a lot of different learning behaviors. And so this could be different, and this is different for teachers to deal with different kinds of students. Thank you very much.
All right, well, I'm very honored to be in the company of these presenters. Thank you again to the organizers. I'm enjoying the EPA. This is my second time in this conference. Great to still in places this morning. I'm going to talk a bit about the relationship between professional learning and teachers' efficacy beliefs. So that's efficacy you've already heard a couple of times this morning. And again, we wanted to talk more about that. So the overview of my short time with you today is why bother talking about why bother looking at the relationships between professional learning and efficacy. The framework that this research is using is, and the kind of overall research question I have right now, the method, results, and the big so what next kind of questions. I really like this quote. Good teaching is a collaborative accomplishment and responsibility, and a more collaborative and collegial profession improves student learning and achievement. So I thought that was a good way to start about why this is an important topic. And also other reasons. Well, little is known about the impact of different types of professional learning on teachers' motivational beliefs. Little is also known about the sources of efficacy that are fostered through different types of professional learning, and also across teachers' career phases, so they have different needs depending on what stage they're at in their teaching experience. And also, teachers commonly express feelings of isolation, yet they're working within these rich social environments. So, really, do teachers actually prefer collaborative professional learning, or the individual activities that perhaps maybe we would think that are just kind of easier for them to do because they always seem to be on their own? And also, what is the relationship between that career stage and efficacy beliefs in teachers' experience of professional learning? And also, another answer to the why question is I used to be an elementary school teacher, and so my experience of the professional learning that was available and also the professional learning types that I wish was available when I was teaching also motivates my area research. So this is a framework that was developed actually with Professor Hobson as well, and the Alberta Teachers Association. And what we were trying to do is try to start with these 5 types of professional learning that have been found in the literature. So those kind of light blue bubbles, so I can read them because they're a bit hard for you to see. So teacher-initiated learning, that's just another term for those individual courses that teachers might take on their own, perhaps an online course. Professional service is that one-to-one mentorship, and that's something I'm in, and we can chat about after the session. So that's those more than 2 people. So maybe a book club that teachers are involved in, also known as professional learning communities, community of practice, terms you may have heard. Anything that has to do with curricular changes. And so those technically tend to be professional activities that maybe are organized on a school-wide basis or even a district-wide basis on a specific need for that area. And then conferences, just like this one. So kind of these big overall gatherings that maybe touch on several different topics, maybe under one kind of general theme, and also workshops that maybe there could be 3 or 4 of them that address this issue. And so the idea that I'm interested in is that these types of professional learning, what types of sources are teachers getting from this that's going to influence or not influence their self-efficacy, but also their collective efficacy. And this assumption of ours that a collaborative climate is necessary, and that this also occurs in a different way over teachers' experience. So that's that little arrow there. This will all contribute to teachers' professional growth and engaged teaching, and then, of course, ultimately the goal would be student learning. So yeah, the big question was really just how does professional learning influence teachers' self-reflective efficacy? And so I've already thrown around a few terms. I guess what I would like to identify in this talk is this idea that professional learning, that term, is different than professional development. So professional development seems to have been used a lot more up until this point, I guess. But I'm hearing more in the literature the use of professional learning. And so the main difference is that professional development tends to be described as something that's done for teachers or done to teachers, something provided for them, as opposed to professional learning can just be this very kind of autonomous, driven, informal or formal experience that teachers are accessing for their own growth. And teacher self-efficacy and collective efficacy, I have references if you wish to dive into those more for you. And the sources of efficacy, also by Van Dura, I was particularly interested in the idea of verbal persuasion. So really what's going on in those collaborative environments that, that perhaps are encouraging teachers in professional growth. So this is part of my dissertation I'm working on, so I'm just really looking forward to any discussion we have today or after the symposium. So I thought I would just share with you a little bit in a short time. So I wondered with two samples. One was a province-wide study that took 2 years, and there was 5 districts involved. And teachers were asked through questionnaires online questions about their efficacy and their professional learning. And unfortunately, only, you can see in the middle there, only 13 answered all 4 of the questionnaires over the period of 2 years. So we weren't able to do any sort of longitudinal exploration, but there sure was a lot of rich information that we could gather from the different time points as well. And it's also important, and these are some demographics of these teachers. But what was interesting is that these 5 school districts were selected because they were had some sense of feeling that they were effective at professional learning. So this idea that we weren't asking questions to see what could be done better, but what are they doing that maybe we can learn from and that can be shared with other school districts so they can learn from them. And then the other sample was at a mandated professional development or professional learning opportunity. So I thought that would be an interesting opportunity. So it was at a teacher convention over the period of 2 days, and it was just one paper pencil questionnaire. What I enjoyed about actually trying the online data collection versus the paper pencil in person is you find with the online, the teachers will write a lot more, and you get a lot of in that little optional box. It's wonderful. Yet in the in-person paper pencil opportunity, you can hear the conversations the teachers are having with each other as they're going through the questions, and they'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll kind of discuss things that way. So both I found very valuable in contributing to future research. So there was 276 teachers that kindly filled out a questionnaire in exchange for chocolate. And it's amazing what we'll do for some chocolate. And similar demographics as well in the city of about. So then, as I briefly shared, there was 2 different methods used. So for sample 1, it was this idea of online questionnaires. A link was sent to the 5 superintendents of those 5 school districts to then disperse the link so that teachers could confidentially choose to respond or not. And this was done in January and June, so that's the mid and end of the year in Canada of the school year. And in year 1, we started with these reliable measures of efficacy. So for example, how confident are you that you can motivate students who show low interest in school? Or how that's self-efficacy? And how confident are you that teachers in your school can work together to overcome various difficulties in their lives? That's that collective efficacy. Then what we also did was we asked those same questions, but we asked them what type of professional learning influenced that specific type of efficacy. And so we applied those 5 models models. So they had a choice kind of a drop down of choosing which of the 5 models influenced them the most in that particular efficacy item that we're talking about. And we pilot tested the questionnaire and then sent it out. And then got feedback that it was wrong. So in time 2, we sent out a shorter version, same questions, but shorter. The cool thing about this longitudinal study is it involved a focus group portion that I don't have time to report on today, but we used the results from that focus group to influence our second year versions of the questionnaire. So that was quite informative for sure. And yeah, again, we administered the questionnaire 2 more times. And so then the paper pencil questionnaire had similar self-efficacy and collective efficacy questions. What we had in common between sample 1 and sample 2 that I'm really into for my dissertation is this idea of these open-ended questions. So in the last 6 months, what professional learning activity has most boosted your teaching confidence? We use that as close to that self-efficacy language. In your ability to enhance student learning and why, and then similar question that has to do with collective efficacy. So here's some examples of what our questionnaire looked like online. So these were the how confident are you that you can type of questions. And again, what I'm also finding interesting is how much teachers will type in that tiny little box at the end that so we had questions like, what were the key professional learning experiences that led to your confidence rating? These are, again, similar questions that have to do with collective efficacy. And this is what happened with our in year 2. So after we received these preliminary results through the focus groups, but also preliminary results from our year 1 questionnaires, we found that teachers were using different language to describe. So different language than those 5 types that we found in the literature. So they were using collaboration as kind of the big one. So collaboration with other teachers, implementing special projects. AC that's a local term. That's basically those curriculum changes that I referred to. But for them, that kind of embodied their curriculum changes. Attending workshops or conferences, and then other. So there was this idea that other was that kind of teacher-initiated stuff. So. We also asked teachers, we also were curious about what the point of their own professional learning was. So there's lots of interesting stuff coming out of there as well that I can't report on in the last few minutes. So just some general results. Professional learning activities are a moderate influence on efficacy. Teachers' efficacy beliefs, so separate from asking questions just specifically about professional learning, were moderately high anyways. And then when we looked at when they were assigning the influence of specific types of professional learning to their efficacy, it was lower, but still moderate. The teacher-initiated activities, so those that they felt they had choice over and were more likely to influence their self-efficacy. Those group activities, so professional learning communities, seem to influence collective efficacy more. Collaboration, the big reason, or the big source of efficacy was that verbal persuasion. So the idea that they're able to get feedback from other people was really key in their professional growth. And we found that mid-career teachers reported the highest levels of efficacy. And so that was really interesting. In sample 2, we also found the same thing, that efficacy was significantly lower in later careers. So there was this sort of increase and decrease over the lifespan of career basis. And both preferred collaborative professional learning activities. So although, and this need for them perhaps because of the so there is research by Professor Hoffman, actually, that also shows that there is this high point in the middle career stage. Also, I'm just starting to read on these recent results from OECD. We can talk more about that after too, if you wish. That's also supporting this idea that collaborative professional learning is the way to help make our teachers more effective and helping them feel more effective. And also this helps provide support for this idea that's put out by those the authors that I shared the quote with at the beginning of my talk. They say that we should be actually focusing on those middle teachers, because if we can keep them at a high level of efficacy, that will that will help the new teachers and the late career teachers. And I have lots of ideas for the future that we can talk about. And this is something I was thinking about to try to take away. That teachers, I think, really want to be co-creators of their own professional learning. So, a whole bunch of things that were coming out of their voices through these two samples so far. And yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you.
What grade level were the teachers mainly that you had in the study?
Right, yes. For sample one, it was like 44% were elementary, and then the rest were higher. And then I think it's 6% was yeah. So the question was, how are you defining collaboration, and how is it different from feedback or different from any of the other activities? And that's what we found the difference between our year one collection and our year two, is that it seemed like for some teachers, everything kind of comes under this collaborative umbrella. So there were several activities that were graded under multiple types of professional learning. So it's all quite messy, yes. But it seemed that it had to be effective collaboration. So there seems to be also a need for teachers to actually understand what good collaboration is, and how to go about it in order to get what they need out of this. So, it was very overlapping. It wasn't those 5 types.
What are the years for major?
Right, thank you. Between 8 and, 23 years is like that midpoint. And so for the 8 and their research is very specific actual career stage at 6. But
That was the teachers. That was
yeah, like that's like the ratings of their self-efficacy, I guess, yeah.
This will be the last one within our symposium. I will present you a project where we focus on teachers' attitudes, motivation, and self-related cognitions in the field of text-picture integration, and how students perceive those the teaching of those teachers. So, because we are conducting this research in a very specific field, I'll give you a short introduction into multi-representational material. And then I will focus on relevant teaching characteristics. Why are certain characteristics important for teaching with multi-representational material? And I will then come to our research. So first of all, when we talk about multi-representational material, this is kind of material that is omnipresent in schools, in elementary school as well as secondary school. If you think of school books, perhaps you will recognize text and pictures like this. When we talk about micro-representation of material. We talk about text and integrated pictures. You see here on the left, you have a text which provides information for the students, and this text, on the other hand, is linked to this instructional picture. On the left-hand side, it also provides information. And therefore, it's very hard for the student to understand how, or it can be very challenging for students to connect those both sources of information. How is information linked? What's presented in the text? What is presented in the picture? On the other hand, it can bear several advantages. So both sources can complement each other. There's information provided in the picture that clarifies information that's also provided in the text. But on the other hand, you can imagine that it is cognitively very challenging for students, especially in elementary school. Nevertheless, similar text and pictures are also found in elementary school books. So, assuming that this kind of material is difficult to understand for students, teachers really need to facilitate learning with this kind of material. They need to know what are students' problems, how can I help students to learn this material, how can I offer adequate learning materials. Yeah, so this is a quite complex process, and therefore we refer to a model of teaching and learning in our research, which is based on the one hand side on offering of learning offers. So we have the teachers here on the one side, and teachers are characterized by their competencies, their professional knowledge, their attitudes, motivation, self-regulation, self-related cognitions, emotions. So those are all teacher characteristics that are relevant for offering learning offers to students. On the other hand, we have a variety of students, and as we have heard before, and those students can be very heterogeneous. They can be heterogeneous according to cognitive, motivational, or emotional premises, and also family peer-related heterogeneity plays an important role. So when we look at the classroom interactions, both teachers on the one hand side and students on the other side come together. So teachers offer learning opportunities in a certain quantity and a certain quality. And those learning offers are perceived by the students in this model according to their prerequisites, and they use those offers. So what we assume that a well-working classroom, high teachers with high competencies offer good quality, good learning offers, and students' prerequisites, of course, they all influence the school's success, not only in terms of achievement, but also in terms of motivation and self-related cognitions of students. So as you can see, what's happening in classrooms, we assume is very complex, and in this talk I will focus only on certain aspects of this model. So we found studies focusing on attitudes, motivation, self-related cognitions of teachers that are relevant for offering high-quality learning offers. And on the other hand, we can ask, okay, what do teachers do? How do teachers offer their learning offers? But the other question is, how do students perceive those learning offers? How can they learn with what the teachers are doing? And again, we are dealing here with teaching with multi-representation of material, so a very challenging part of learning. So what did we find in literature about teachers' characteristics that are relevant for offering learning offers? There is a lot of research on teachers' attitudes showing that it is an aspect of their value commitment that is important for teachers to offer material in a certain way. We think, of course, motivation is the basis for teachers and students as well to perform at all, to teach and be successful in teaching. And last but not least, we focus on the self-related so self-efficacy, which has a big impact on teachers' behavior, which has been shown in several studies before, and also teachers' emotions that are the basis for teachers' well-being in the classroom. We assume that these four aspects are part of teachers' competencies, and that these are also relevant for teaching with text picture material. So what does that have to do with the actual classroom interactions? Therefore, we focus on, first of all, the quantity of learning offers. That means how often do teachers really teach with multi-representational material in their classrooms. So if you think about time on task, the more you teach with this type of material, the more learning offers you can get, the higher the possibility to learn something. But quantity is not everything, of course. Learning offers has also or need a certain quality. Therefore, we chose two aspects of instructional quality. On the one hand side, this is comprehension support. So how do teachers facilitate learning with multi-representational material? Are they helpful? Do they give adaptive explanations to the students? And on the other hand, how cognitively demanding are those tasks the teacher gives? So in terms of cognitive activation, this has been proven to be a very strong predictor for student outcomes. So summarizing, we think that these three aspects are quite valuable to describe quality and quantity of learning offers. So far to our theoretical background. The two research questions that that guided our research were, first of all, we wanted to describe what are teachers' attitudes, motivation, and self-related cognitions in the special field of multi-representational material. To our knowledge, there is no research in this specific field, and so actually we can't really state a direct hypothesis according to that, because it's a very specific field. Teaching with multi-representational material is not embedded in the German teacher education. I don't know if it is implemented in your universities, if you're preparing teachers for schools, at least in Germany, it's not systematically embedded, and so we can't really say anything about their about these aspects of teachers' competence. On the other hand, then, we want to investigate the relations of teachers' competency aspects and the related teaching quality. And there we assume, according to our model and according to research in other fields, that the aspects of teachers' competencies are positively related to our measures of instructional quality in terms of quantity and quality of the learning offers. So how did we try to answer our research question? Well, we conducted a longitudinal study in Germany, elementary school, in grade 4. There is a specialty in the German school system. After grade 4, students go to a secondary school level. So after grade 4, they are separated into different school tracks, and so this is the last year of elementary school in Germany. Altogether, we could find 49 schools that participated voluntarily in our study. This sums up to 76 teachers, and what's common for primary schools, most of the teachers were female, and we had a mean age of 44 years, and a teaching experience of about 17 years. The students, we only had a sample of about 1,400 students. Half of them were female, roundabout, and that's our common sample in elementary school. Okay, so assessing teachers' competencies or aspects of teachers' competencies, we used the teacher questionnaire and we asked the teachers how they perceive the utility of multi-representational material. So what do you think is it essential for you to teach with text and integrated pictures? Are you motivated if you see that pictures are integrated in text? How self-efficacy do you, what's your self-efficacy in those, this teaching with this material? Or are you afraid of teaching with text and integrated pictures? As you can see, we have acceptable compass alphas in all of these 4 scales. The instruction or the quality of instruction was assessed by the student questionnaire. We asked the students how often they perceive text and integrated pictures in their classrooms, how useful they think explanations of teachers are, so what's the comprehension support, is the teacher always there, is he helpful, and how cognitively demanding do you think learning with text and integrated pictures is. So do you think you have to think a lot? Is it very challenging? And again, we have here satisfying reliabilities, and we also look at the inter-class correlation, which is quite low. But even if it's low, we decided to use the complex analysis method. So we included the cluster structure of our data, because students are clustered in those classes, and therefore we did a complex structural equation only within cluster. Okay, so what did we find? For teachers' competences, we find quite high values for attitudes, motivation, and self-efficacy. So teachers think that teaching with text and pictures is important for their teaching. They are motivated to do that, and they also show quite high self-efficacy belief. In the scale negative emotions, you can see that the value is quite low, so they are not really afraid to teach with this kind of material. How does the quality of instruction look like? Here we find that students report a quite high quantity of multi-representation of material tasks. They think that the support of teachers is very helpful, and it's a medium cognitive demand they perceive in this kind of classroom interactions. So far, the descriptives, how are they related? So first of all, we looked at teachers' attitudes and how they are related to the instructional quality measures. And here we find no significant relations, and the only positive part here is between teachers' attitudes and the cognitive demands, or the perceived cognitive demands, but again, no significant relation. A similar picture can be seen when we look at teachers' motivation. Here we have a tendentially significant path, so the higher teachers are motivated to teach with multi-representation material, the higher students perceive the cognitive demand. For teachers' self-efficacy beliefs, we were not able to find any significant relations similar to their negative emotions, but at least we see that the direction of path here is negative, so the less fear a teacher has, the higher are the quality and quantity measures here on the left-hand side, but unfortunately all those results fail to reach the 10% significance level. So what can we say from our research so far? The relations we found point in the expected direction at least. Students describe lesson offers as cognitively demanding when teachers are motivated to teach with text and integrated pictures. But on the other hand, we have to say, the paths are not significant. So it is a very specific field. Those are very specific questions for teachers and students. We have a quite small sample size of 76 classes and teachers. So therefore, we have only marginally significant relations. And therefore, our aims for the future are perhaps to find a more objective description of what's happening in the classroom. You can imagine if you ask students about a very specific field, it's hard for them to answer or the validity might be hard to prove here. And so we also conducted a video study, actually video lessons of those teachers, and we were able to analyze that, or we are analyzing it right now, so otherwise I would have presented those results. So that's our next step, to see what's really happening in the classrooms. We would also like to investigate the relation between teachers' competencies and the students' actual outcomes in terms of achievement, but also self-related cognitions. And we also have to describe teachers' professional knowledge, because especially content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge have been proven to be very predictive for student outcomes. We still have to do this project. So I thank you for your attention.
I just have a speculative one. Do you think the findings would be different if they were arrested in the U.S.?
I'm not sure how familiar are teachers with multi-representational material. Is this kind of teacher preparation? Is it integrated in university studies? I wouldn't think that there is a big difference, because I think this kind of material is used everywhere in the world. So you see schools, you see texts and pictures, they're sort of related, but the question is how are teachers and students prepared to deal with this material. Usually it's an implicit task, you have to deal with it, you have to learn with it, but nobody is told how can we actually provide a meaningful understanding and learning. Yeah. I guess it's the same. Another question? And I'm very happy to introduce Leslie Raj, who is our discussion.
Hello, everyone. It's still morning, right? So good morning.
Yes.
My name is Leslie Grant, and no, I'm not James Strong, who was on the program. He's my colleague at the College of William and Mary, unable to be here. And so I'm delighted to be here with you all today to provide some discussion on studies that we hear this morning on teacher effectiveness. I feel a bit like a cousin visiting a side of the family. This is my first APA convention, and I live in the world of education policy planning and leadership, and so run in some circles that overlap, certainly with many of my colleagues here. But I'd like to first provide some general commentary on that looks really ugly up there. Something bad is happening. But at any rate, oh goodness. Okay. But at any rate, to provide some general commentary on these the overlap in these studies that were presented, and some specific commentaries on each study. And then I would like for us to have a few minutes for others in the audience who would like to comment on the studies that were presented here. And just to give you a bit about my background, certainly in the area of teacher effectiveness, in terms of studying effective teaching, and indeed in various cultural contexts, as has been discussed here in this last comment, and talking about would the findings be the same here in the United States. So let me just again begin with some general points here. In that, effectiveness is really an elusive concept for us to get our arms around. To think about what are the complex tasks of teaching, and we think about those qualities of effective teachers. What is it that makes an effective teacher as they move forward? And much of the research that has been done in the process and product, that production function literature, in terms of what makes effective teachers. And if you think about it, there's a value chain or a logic chain that's being followed here. that the inputs of teaching and what Rob shared in terms of coming into the profession, selecting the right teachers, leads to effective implementation of processes. Right? Whatever it is that we're going to be, whatever strategies that we're going to be using. And if we use these effective strategies and we have these attitudes, behaviors that make us effective teachers, then we're going to get positive student outcomes. So there's a logic, right? There's a value chain that is here. But that input, the inputs, the processes, and the products or the outcomes of teachings are all situated within a context. Whether it's an elementary context, a secondary context, working with different heterogeneous populations, working in different countries, what is the educational context within that country, what are the aims and goals of education within that country, and so all of it sits within a context, but at any rate, whatever context within which it sits, we do have this value chain. There are certain attitudes, behaviors that make teachers more or less effective, and that those attitudes and behaviors lead to effective implementation, and that effective implementation leads to improvement in student learning. And so those are some of the general concepts when I was thinking about what had been shared here in terms of pulling together for those inputs, processes, and products. And by the way, my colleague Megan Shaw-Moran at the College of William & Mary would be delighted to see her work in just about every presentation that was presented here, and I'll share that with her when I see her this week. But as we know, the holy grail of whatever we're doing now seems to be connecting whatever we're doing to student learning. That is the holy grail, and it is very difficult to do, as you all know. There are several different links in there, indeed, to student learning. But what I'd like to now jump to, and again, in terms of each of the individual presentations, is that whatever we study in linking teacher effectiveness to various aspects, we're looking at teacher education as well as the practical implications for teacher education, as well as hiring teachers, selecting teachers, what have you, to include what knowledge, skills, and aptitudes, values do pre-service teachers need to have? What do they need to have? How do we recruit and induct effective teachers? How do we design and implement? And I have here professional development, but I'm going to say professional learning now, Tracy, because of you. Professional learning, and really when I say design and implement, I think it goes against what Tracy was trying to say, which is that's someone designing it for them. Or how do we maybe facilitate professional learning rather than design and implement and being done to you? Conducting valid and credible evaluations of teachers, and indeed using those evaluations to make decisions. But again, this type of alignment is receiving increasing attention across the globe, as has been alluded to, the PISA studies and the OECD results that have been provided. But just a few points about the different studies that have been presented here. And again, just a couple of points. With the novice teacher selection, quite an interesting study there, looking at those situations and whether it's best to look at what would you do if or what did you do when, right? So which is better in terms of anchoring and making a decision for hiring a teacher in the classroom. In addition, as was discussed, what is the predictive validity of such measures, and what are we using as that measure of effectiveness? And again, the holy grail is student learning, but might we look at retention of teachers over time? Okay, but we want to retain the right ones, right? So eventually we want to link it to student learning. So what is that intermediate variable of teacher effectiveness before we can actually get to the student learning that we might look at in terms of predictive value, which might be retention of teachers over time, increasing in self-efficacy, etc. And then my colleague Miriam, who shared about the heterogeneity of students and looking at a measure to look at their views and the cost and intrinsic values and what have you. And again, if you think about eventually developing some type of instrument to measure this. And again, I go to the theory to practice. If we were to design an intervention, would it improve teachers' attitudes, motivation, if you will, in working with those from various backgrounds? And then my colleague who developed this or organized this symposium, looking at the motivation, attitudes, self-efficacy beliefs in terms of multi-motivational media. And when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the use of this material, and my thought was, well, how do we know that the use of this material in the first place leads to improved student learning, right? And so that goes to learning theory, but we're having to work with what is given to us, right? So we're assuming that using these MRMs is going to improve student learning, but it certainly is based on learning theory, but we would need to look at we're given this material to use, and so how are we using it? So it's almost like, are we questioning the use of MRM in the first place? Or is it necessarily that this is what we have to work with, and how do we work with it in the best way possible? And in addition, it would be interesting, as you had indicated, in terms of going from perception to more objective types of studies, looking at the student perception of quantity, which was interesting. I wonder if you were to ask the teachers the same thing about quantity, would you see a correlation? Would they say, oh yeah, we use it a lot, and kids say, no, we don't use it very much, So would you see a difference there? And in terms of the teacher's perception of cognitive demand. So what is the teacher's perception of cognitive demand of these tasks versus the student's perception of cognitive demand? Another possible source of information. And then, in addition, looking at, again, this idea of professional learning, and I was very interested in your conceptual framework that you've developed over time. And again, I use this term a lot, but there's a value chain or a theory of action that is embedded in the conceptual framework. And so we've provided different, here's the research on self-efficacy, here's the research on collective self-efficacy. But what do we have in there that's providing those linkages that this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this? And part of that is what you're testing. But there may be some of the literature that's out there that this leads to this, leads to this. And I'm sure in a write-up that would be provided. In addition, I had the same question about how do we define collaborative professional learning? How is it defined? And again, the holy grail, which is, does collaborative professional learning lead to improved student outcomes? And that's certainly what we would want to take a look at. And so commonalities of these is that mainly that's focused on perceptions of folks, how they perceive professional learning, how they perceive the working with heterogeneity or heterogeneous students. And so each study, though, focused on the importance of teacher perceptions or attitudes to the teaching and learning process. And certainly, we would all agree, whether we come from an ed psych background or my background in terms of policy and leadership, in terms of uncovering these perceptions and attitudes is a critical part of that value chain. That one would lead to the next, would lead to the next in terms of improved student outcomes. One other interesting part that I found was this issue, going back to Tracy's presentation, was this relationship between self-efficacy and teaching experience, right? That there's a curvilinear relationship between experience and student outcomes. That we go like this and we hit a plateau, and then at some point we start to go like this, right? That's when we say, oh, it's time to do something else, right? And so seeing that relationship between the self-efficacy and this teaching experience over time, just wanted to make that point. But again, I applaud those of you, all of you here, who are working to look at the research and trying to find a way to link it to improve student outcomes. Because what we're doing needs to touch what's happening in the classroom. We can't just have it stay here in room 204A in the Washington Convention Center. So at this point, what I would ask, are there any other discussion points or thoughts that you all had in terms of the presentations that were shared? Any questions or comments, recommendations that you would have for our panelists?
Something about this idea of things trait a challenge to think that way for example. But there is a strong link in a lot of fields but the other thing to keep in mind is that you have to recognize that people are malleable, especially young people, inexperienced teachers, for example, training, but at the same time, there's that initial breakthrough.
And I worry about going directly from inputs to outcomes, in terms of applying these attitudes without thinking about looking at new teacher personalities, you said, Robin, and being malleable. In the U.S., there's a move to tie right away to outcomes, right? And to make decisions based on that. And I worry about that. What are the intermediate outcomes or short-term outcomes that we're going for, which is would be performance in the classroom if we were to go in with an observation instrument and do linkages back to some of those attitudes and behavior rather than jumping straight to student learning outcomes as a more direct link.
meetings or some type of tool. And I don't know if that's very important,
I think it goes to what are the anticipated outcomes of education in general, right? It's not only, if you look at mission statements across, in other countries and I'm interested in mission statements because it speaks volumes as to the outcomes anticipated. So is it just academic achievement? Is it improved social emotional competence? What is it that we anticipate as the outcomes? Because then that drives how we're linking these things into improved outcomes. So what are those outcomes? And that's a broader societal issue that we're facing, and again, in different cultural context as well. Any other comments?
like I said, one for Tracy. But anyway, I was thinking about this idea of, you're asking